Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. It's TheSketchMonkey here. I'm here at McLaren Denver because today, as you can see, it's a pretty special day today because we're looking at the McLaren GT. This is a brand new 2023 model, and the thing with the McLaren GT is pretty interesting because it is a mid-engine supercar, but it's angled or marketed as a GT car, and I'm having a hard time thinking about any other car that has a mid-engine supercar layout that is sort of a GT car at the same time. So it's a very special car. What we're gonna do in this video is, of course, have a look at this beautiful design. There are a couple of things in the front end that I would like to play around with. Then we're gonna have a look at the side, the rear, the interior, and then we're gonna take this for a drive. Let's have a look at some of the basic specs for the McLaren GT. You have a 4-liter twin-turbo V8 putting out 612 horsepower and 465 pound-feet of torque, connected to a 7-speed automatic transmission. All of this power is sent to the rear wheels only. 0 to 60 done in 2.8 seconds. Fuel economy sits at 12 city, 22 highway, and the price for this is $230,000. Starting with the front end design of the McLaren GT, I like the overall package of this thing, but if it's one detail that I would like to change, it's going to happen here in the front end. I do love the very slim LED headlights that we have underneath this beautiful curved LED light, which is an indicator in the daytime running light. Typical McLaren style to have this curvature here, and then how this wraps in to the bodywork itself in the lower section. Very beautifully done. I also love the line flow that we have on the top of this hood, or front as some would call it. Super crisp lines with a bunch of smooth surfacing, creating a very dynamic looking surfacing of the top end of the McLaren GT. Looking at the lower section of the McLaren GT, and everything here is obviously functional. This is a supercar. The design must follow some sort of function, and it definitely does that down here. You have these big intakes on each side, so you can even see the radiator here at the lower corner, and this intake in the middle. I love how everything down here, the black piece, is integrated in the overall shape of this design, with some additional air vents going to the sides of it, with a very pointy nose here. But let's jump in and talk about what it is I think could be changed on this McLaren GT when it comes to the front end. All right, so when you look at the proportions of this thing, I think overall there's something with the front end. It feels like the nose of the car sits too high. And it also, I'm a little bit ashamed to say this, but it also reminds me a little bit of the C8 Corvette. And that has all to do with the height of this line here. So what I want to do, just bring the nose down and have more of a sloping curvature in the front end to bring the nose closer to the ground. And just making that tiny little change to this design, to me at least, I think it completely transforms the overall proportion, specifically in this area in the front end. Coming around to the side view of the McLaren GT, and I love what's going on here. This being the GT car, I feel like McLaren kind of took it a little bit easy with the styling and didn't go all crazy with line flow and curvatures and stuff like that going in and out of the body lines. We have very clean surfaces here going into this massive side intake, because as you know, it's mid-engine. We need to have some sort of intakes either up here like we have on the 720S, but in this case they made it a bit more traditional with this air vent going down here. Further down you do have this line that I think is also very beautiful, because you can see how the light reflects off that piece and makes it feel very tight and athletic in the side view, looking at it from a view that you're looking at it from right now. Now there's really nothing in the side view that I would like to redesign, but I think in the side view you can clearly see, at least that's what popped up in my mind the first time I saw the GT, just how high the front end sits in comparison to the rest of the body. I do love the sculpting of the side mirrors here, and that we have two-tone. We have the black roof up top with this gorgeous blue metallic, and then you have an additional air vent coming in right here on top of these beautifully sculpted fenders. Overall, a fantastic looking side view in my opinion. The wheels here though, pretty interesting, because we have a staggered setup. We have 21s in the rear and we have 20s in the front end, but these in the front are only 225 millimeter wide, which means they're pretty thin in the front end. In the rear we do have 295, so they add a little bit more width on there. But I would like to have the wheels flush with the bodywork, and have specifically in the rear end, have the wheels stick out a little bit more to really plant it on the ground when we look at it from a rear view. Coming around to the 3/4 rear view, and this is definitely, for me at least, this is the money shot for the McLaren GT. This rear end is one of the best looking rear ends of McLarens in recent times, in my opinion. I think it's just a stunning looking design. And just look how beautifully the rear fender kind of fades in here into this piece and then comes up in this beautiful ducktail in the rear with the two peaks. You have one peak right here, another peak up here to create some sort of curvature in this design. It's just a stunning mix of some sharp chamfers and creases in combination with the otherwise very fluid design that we have on the McLaren GT. Another detail that I think McLaren is doing absolutely fantastic right now. Just have a look at how thin this taillight is. It's like a blade on a knife. That's how thin this is. And I've always had a weak spot for thin LEDs that go in just a horizontal line, specifically on a proportions like this where you have supercar proportions, because what this does is stretches out the rear end even more. And then we have this texture housing the taillights in the back with these mesh or honeycomb pattern that we have up top and down low. It just creates a very nice, almost cave-like housing for the taillights, where they sit very deep inside of the body of the McLaren GT. Now, we can't not talk about the rear end without having a look at the straight rear end view of this car. And what I love here is you can see just how wide and planted this thing is. It looks absolutely fantastic, with some simple styling. And then you have this big black diffuser. And what black diffusers does on a car like this, not that it necessarily needs it, but it eats out some of the volume of the car. And then you have the two black bazooka, definitely, I can fit my fist in here, bazooka tailpipes in the rear end. Overall, I think McLaren did an absolutely fantastic job with this design. The only thing, as I mentioned before, I want to change is to just have the nose go down by just 2 inches lower in the front end, and that's it. Otherwise, a fantastic looking car by McLaren. Welcome to the interior of the 2023 McLaren GT. We have a 7-inch infotainment screen, more on that later. We have a 12.3-inch gauge cluster, which looks fantastically integrated in this dash. It sits almost like a unit on top of the dash itself, and we have the blue stitching going all around this interior, connecting to the exterior color. Very beautifully done. The thing about McLaren interiors, though, they are very, very simplistic when it comes to the styling. I mean, just look at everything in here. There's nothing that sort of distracts you when you're out driving this thing. Let's fire it up and let me show you what's going on in this infotainment screen. Hopefully that exhaust is not going to be too loud for the audio. So let's start at the top. You do have a speaker up here that is also very nicely sculpted and follows the overall design of the rest of the interior. Then you have two very simple vents, round vents, easy to adjust. You know exactly where the air is going to come out from. This 7-inch infotainment screen, though, so let's talk about this for a second. Is 7-inch too small of an infotainment screen for you? I really don't think so, because I think this is actually preferable in a car like this. When you do have a hypercar or a supercar like this is, you don't want to have it be too intruding in the design. And 7-inch for me totally works. You have all the settings in here. You have the brightness, the light settings, or the color settings that you want in the ambient lighting of the interior. And if you click this button, you're going to pop up the navigation, which looks pretty nice and feels very, very responsive in this case. You also have the button for all the settings, the navigation settings and so on. And if you click the middle, it goes to the home screen. And again, there's not really a lot to do in this infotainment screen, and that's exactly what I want in a car like this. And I also like this integration of this infotainment screen. At least it didn't put a flat, iPad on the dash. This looks nicely integrated with some housing, chrome or silver trim going around it. And I also like how it hangs down like this, because it gives you access to the two cup holders that you have here. You also have a 12-volt behind that, in addition to the McLaren GT plaque right here, looking very nice. And moving on to the center console, you have the settings for handling. So you have the handling in comfort, sport, or track. You can turn the traction control on and off here as well. And then you have the powertrain, comfort, sport, or track. Track is going to open up the exhaust a little bit more. I'm going to keep it in comfort right now when we're recording this thing. And you can also make sure that if you want these to stay put, you just deactivate these buttons by just clicking this activate button right here. You also have the engine start button up top with the hazard light, the lock button, and this nicely integrated gear selector. You have drive, neutral, and reverse. And when we hit the reverse button, you're going to get the backup camera in the gauge cluster right here, which feels pretty grainy, and it is rather small, but it's definitely going to help you when you're backing up, because you still don't really have a perfect real visibility from the mirror up here, even though it is pretty good for this type of vehicle. And you have the sensors all around it here on the infotainment screen when you are in reverse. To the right side of the gear selector, you do have a launch button, and you have the auto on and off for the engines and stoplights. And as you know, I always turn this thing off. Moving further down, you do have another cup holder here, so you have 3 in total, 2 pretty small ones up top, and then a regular sized cup holder right here in the middle. Lifting up the center armrest, you do have a USB port in here, and a little bit, the tiniest storage space I've ever seen under an armrest. But I do like the design of this thing, and that they put some trim pieces that makes this feel a little special and connects with the rest of the trim that we have in the interior. Moving on to the steering wheel, look at the simplicity of this steering wheel and how organic this whole thing feels. Super nice styling with the silver trim, having this very organic shape to them on the spokes. Going down to the third spoke at the bottom, you have flat bottom steering wheel, no buttons whatsoever on the steering wheel itself, which is fantastic. Then you have this metal shift pedals, which are huge and look pretty much like 2 knives, and they are very sharp up in the corners. You want to make sure you don't cut your fingers when you're shifting really quickly. Overall, a pretty small steering wheel, and it is rather thin as well, but it feels very good to hold this thing. To the right side of the steering wheel, you have the adjustments for the side mirrors with this toggle here, and on the left side you have the adjustments for the light settings, and you can also open the front and open the trunk as well with the 2 buttons on the left side of the steering wheel. All the cruise controls and stuff like that is in the stalks that you have underneath the steering wheel, behind it and underneath, and then you have, of course, the wiper controls on the right and the indicators and light settings on the left side. Now, this being a GT, I'm a little bit surprised that we don't have a glove box, but we do have some interesting silver trim here, and it says McLaren. If you shade it like this with your hand, you're gonna see that it says McLaren underneath this texture or surface with some pattern design right next to it. Up top though, we have one of the coolest sunroofs I've ever seen. You just hit this button and it turns into transparent, or if you don't want as much sunshine in, you just hit this night button and it goes into a very, very dark blue color, looking fantastic. This is a very cool feature. I'm not sure how much this would cost to put in a normal car, but I wish more cars had a sunroof like this. Moving on to the seats. These seats are interesting as well because they don't look too aggressive. They feel very GT-ish to me when you look at the design of this thing. With some nice bolstering, you have the controls for it situated right here at the very bottom underneath your right leg. That's where you have the controls for the powered control settings of the seat itself. And you also have this blue stitching that comes back in the dash and also comes back here in the seats, which I think looks fantastic, as I said, in combination with the exterior blue color. Looking at these beautiful doors, you have Bowers & Wilkins sound system integrated in the door here nicely. What I like about McLaren is that they include this curvature that we see in the front end and of course in the logo of McLaren. You see that coming back in various places everywhere in the interior. For example, have a look at this. The integration for the vent on the sides, you have a curvature there as well. In the steering wheel, comes back a little bit here with this organic shape, and in the doors as well. You have the door handle being a metal piece right here, and of course the window controls are located behind the door handle. Overall, I like how these doors function. They're very easy to just open up like this, and if you want to close it, you don't have to use a lot of force. Just bring it down and close it. Overall, this interior is what I would like to see in a car like this. No distractions, very simplistic. There's 0 buttons on the steering wheel. This is about the drive, and I love that McLaren are sticking to that formula when it comes to even the McLaren GT. Alrighty guys, taking the 2023 McLaren GT out for a drive. So what do we have under the hood? We have a 4-liter twin-turbo V8 putting out 612 horsepower. 0 to 60 in this thing, 2.9 seconds. And the thing is, all that power, 612 horsepower, is sent to those 295mm wide rear tires, which means that it could get a little tricky in this car if you go nuts with it. Alright, so we're coming onto an on-ramp here. Let's just see how this goes when we push it a little bit onto the highway. I'm in manual, I have it in sport. I'm going to keep it in sport, not push it into track. Wow. It pulls so hard, this thing, and that was just half throttle. It's nuts. So let's go down to third gear, and let's see. Wow, this is so fast. It does not feel like a GT car when it comes to the power. You can definitely feel the turbo lag. The carbon ceramic brakes in this thing definitely feels like you need to warm them up a little bit for them to work properly. And I can't believe that this is marketed as a GT car. It's a supercar, mid-engine supercar with GT capabilities, with all the luggage. I mean, you can't fit in a lot of luggage, but a lot more than you could in any other supercar. It's connected to a 7-speed automatic gearbox, super snappy, quick shifts, and I have it in manual mode, so I'm in control of the shifts, and you can see that the shifters themselves, the paddles, are connected to the steering wheel. Well, down to second. You know, you just can't push this for more than 2 seconds at a time because it's so fast. 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds. It's a fantastic driver's machine, this thing. Oh, you can hear the turbos in the back. So good to hear that noise again. I haven't heard that in a very, very long time. I love this car. It's just a fantastic supercar. Supercar in the meaning that it doesn't just go fast, but you can also take some luggage with you, which is fantastic in a package like this. All right, we're in first gear right now. Let's do one more pull. Oh yeah, I love this car. Well done, McLaren. Huge thanks to McLaren Denver for providing this car for me to review for you guys today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to check out their full inventory, I'm going to link that down in the description. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.